Good evening. Thank you all for coming today. I'm Reverend Dr. Jeffrey Goodine, pastor of Church on Wheels Spoken Word out of Deltona, Florida. And this is another edition of Bible Study 2024. Thank you all for tuning in. Like us on YouTube at Pastor Jeffrey Goodine. Subscribe, hit the bell to be notified. You see, if I get so many subscriptions or so many likes or however it is, they say they'll do something. Well, let's see how many let's see what they're going to do. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on our Facebook group page, Church on Wheels, Let the Good News Roll. Facebook Live, Jeffrey Goodine. Twitter, at Goodine Jeffrey. Not Twitter, I'm sorry. X, formerly known as Twitter, at Goodine Jeffrey. Instagram, Goodine Jeffrey. And Clubhouse, Church on Wheels Ministry. Thank you all for tuning in. Tonight we're going to start another series. And this series is entitled Praying Beyond God's Ability. And the foundation for this is in the book of James, James chapter 1, verses 6 to 8. Now that's just the foundation for praying beyond God's ability. Because sometimes we do prayers and we expect an answer and then we don't get it. And then we go off into convulsions and things of that nature. And then we want to know why. And, it is what it is. In James chapter 1, verses 6 to 8, before I get to that, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Clubhouse. Send me an email, pastorjeffreygoodine@gmail.com. That's pastorjeffreygoodine@gmail.com. You will get added to the list and you will get a copy of the handout. And you use the handout so you could follow along with us in Bible study. And you can take the handouts yourself and then you can create your own Bible study. It's already done. In fact, I encourage you to do that. So send me an email at pastorjeffreygoodine@gmail.com, pastorjeffreygoodine@gmail.com. Or you can send it to me in a message in Facebook. I will get it. I will add you to the list and you will get a copy of the handout for Bible study so that you can follow along with us in Bible study. Tonight, I'm praying beyond God's ability. And the foundation of this is James chapter 1, verses 6 to 8. It really starts at verse 5 when James says, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God. That means if you're going to pray, we pray to God. We ask God, we ask him in prayer. We talk to him in a spiritual sense. So let him ask of God that giveth to all men liberally and upbraideth not. It means when you ask him, he's not going to look at your past. He's not going to, he's going to give it to you, probably more than you ask. And he says, and it shall be given. Now, verse 6 says, but let him ask in faith, nothing wavering. For he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. For let not that man think he shall receive anything of the Lord. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. So here James is saying that if you're going to ask, you got to ask without wavering. You got to believe it. You can't ask in your mind someplace else. Remember, he wants your soul. He wants your imagination, your mind, your heart, your soul, your mind. He wants it all. But then what James said, if you're praying and wavering, if you're praying with a double-minded manner, he's saying, let not that man think he shall receive anything of God. So if you're praying and you're praying double-minded, God's not going to answer that. He can't do that. So that's an instance of praying beyond God's ability. He can't answer that kind of prayer. You're wavering. You're not fully into it, in essence. You're not fully believing it. I mean, you're saying the words, but you don't have nothing in your heart. And James is saying, let not that man think he shall receive anything from God. So what James is saying, if you're praying like that, you can bet you're not going to receive anything from God. So you kind of praying beyond God's ability. And you put him in a bad position. He want to answer, but you wavering. You're praying and not even believing that you're going to get it. You're praying double-minded. So that is the basis of, and I put that here as the basis of, but there's some other scriptures that we're going to cover in the Bible study. And so in the handout, when we say that praying beyond God's ability, I mean, really, I mean, how do you, I mean, come on, how do you expect God to answer something? How do you expect? How do you expect God to answer? How? Now, I mean, I want you to think about that for a minute. How? How do you expect God to answer that when you waver? You don't believe it. You don't believe it. You don't believe it. So if you don't believe it, then what do you expect God? You expect God to know that, well, okay, you don't believe it, but you're going to try it anyway? You're going to try it anyway? That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. Well, anyway, what you think about that? What you think about that? Now, in the handout, I put this Bible study series will force us to face the reality of unanswered prayers and endeavor to do something about it. We're gonna cover some things tonight. You know, that may not be, you know, comfortable, but that's okay. We're going to cover why some of our prayers are not being answered. But here, God will not save, heal, or deliver a man against his will, regardless of how hard and fervently we pray. So James just told you, if you're asking with double-minded, it doesn't matter how hard you pray. It doesn't matter how fervently you pray. If you're praying double-minded, you're not going to get anything from God. So if you're praying to God to save you. You're praying God to heal you. You're praying God to deliver you. But yet you double-minded. And I put, there are errors in our prayer and faith that leave us baffled and frustrated when we practice, that's I put prayer and faith, with little success. We get frustrated when we pray to God with little success. And we start blaming God. We start blaming God. We didn't look at ourselves. We're blaming God. Because you're wavering, you're praying, but you ain't sincere. You're just using words. And as James, in the book of James, he said, let not that man think he shall receive anything of God. How do you expect to receive anything of God? You know how it is when you go to somebody and you want to ask somebody for something, but yet you back and forth and wavering. Guess what? They'll say, you know what? When you make up your mind, and then you come to me. They're not going to answer that question. They're not going to answer it. So you've got to come full force. Praying beyond God's ability is praying a prayer that produces from God an answer. I'm sorry I can't do that for you, even if I wanted to. So how would you like to feel that kind of answer? That God says, I'm sorry I can't do that for you, even if I wanted to. You praying double-minded. God saying, I can't do that for you. I know I want to. I know I can. But you're wavering. You know, the wind blow this way, you praying that way. The wind blow this way, you praying that way. So he's saying that, you know, I mean, think about it. When our prayers go unanswered, that's kind of what God is saying. I'm sorry I can't do that for you, even if I wanted to. And then you get frustrated. You know how it is. It's wow, especially if you ever went down to DMV to try to get something done. And you ain't got all the paperwork. And you want them to do something for you. What did they tell you? I can't do it. I want to. I know what it is. I know what you're trying to get, but I can't do it. Because you don't have all the paperwork. You didn't fill out you didn't touch all the bases. You didn't, you didn't dot your I's, cross all the T's and stuff like that. They know what you want, but they can't help you. So, think of it this way. In my unanswered prayer, I ought to be thinking, what is it that I'm doing in prayer that this prayer is not getting answered? But now I do want you to understand that you have prayed, and I'm talking, when you did that fervent prayer and he answered your prayer, when you think back on it, you were totally engaged in that prayer. You were totally talking to him with your heart, your mind, and your soul. And it got answered. But the other prayer you prayed, this was, I really need this one. Well, you didn't pray the same way. So that prayer goes unanswered. And then we blame God. And unfortunately, that was it. Now, I said using Mark chapter 9 verse 33 as a foundation. And they were up, and he came to Capernaum, And being in the house, he asked them, what was it that ye disputed among yourselves by the way? But they held their peace, for by the way they had disputed among themselves who should be the greatest. And they argued back and forth of who should be the greatest. So I asked a question here. Using Mark 9:33 as our background, can God make a rock so big that he cannot lift it? Can God make a rock so big that he cannot lift it? Now, we talking about, we get ready to discuss something, but can God make a rock so big that he can lift it? And I'm talking about, here we're talking about, having a conversation and whether you believe it or not, and dispute it amongst yourselves. Can God make a rock that's so big he can't lift it? But we say that God can do all things. That all things are possible. But could God make a rock so big that he can't lift it? Now some of us will say no, he can't. Some of us will say yes, he can. He's able to do all things. So that is the dispute. And that's what I'm talking about. How do we discuss it? Like here, they were disputing amongst themselves who was the greatest. And, Jesus had to tell them. But the main objective is the dispute. Could God make a rock so big that even he can't lift it? And that's where the dispute starts. That's where the dispute starts. Because some are going to say all things is possible. That some will say he cannot make a rock that he cannot make a rock so big that he can't lift it, because he's possible, he can do all things. And then you will have some say, if God can do all things, then he can build a rock so big that he can't lift it. So now the dispute starts. And that's kind of what the foundation of what it is. Because think about it. If you're praying with a wavering mind, how God gonna answer that? You actually making a rock too big that he can't lift it. I mean, in an analogy form. You're praying a prayer double-minded. So you actually praying beyond his ability to answer your prayer. He wants to answer your prayer, but you're not praying for, you're praying, but you're praying double-mindedly. Your words are fervently. Your double-mindedness is into the prayer, but you just words. And so, how do you expect him to do anything? Now, I read this somewhere, and I want you to think about when we ask it, is it possible for God to answer a prayer if someone were to pray, God, make the devil bigger and more powerful than you are? Do you think God's going to answer that prayer?
No way.
He should have. But what happens if you're not double-minded in that prayer? What happens if you're fervent in that prayer? You dotted all your I's, crossed all your T's in that prayer. Do you think God would answer that prayer? And then the question would be, why not? You prayed single-mindedly. You prayed fervently. You dotted all your I's, crossed all your T's in your prayer. So this is what, what I'm getting to. Is that we can pray prayers that don't really make sense, but we pray them. It don't benefit nobody. And so I put here, are there limitations and boundaries when we say all things are possible? Yes, he can. All things are possible. Yes, they are. But what are the limitations and the boundaries? Because somebody prayed, I mean, we might look at that and say, man, that's a silly prayer. Just like we asked the question, can God build a rock so big that he can't lift it? But that's silly. Well, you praying double-minded is what? Silly. So I'm using this as a foundation for what it is, that there are limits and boundaries in our prayers. Even though all things are possible, there are limits and boundaries. Because if we start praying prayers like, God, can you, look, God, make the devil bigger and more powerful than you are. That's a silly prayer. But what do you think about the Satan followers? They're praying that he's more powerful. We would call it silly. So the prayers that even though we saying all things are possible, so in our prayers there got to be some limitations and boundaries. And one of those limitations and boundaries is praying double-minded. Double-minded. So let's move on here. Let's move on. So we can dispute those, and that might be something that you know what, you can send me a comment, in the email, whether you can God make a rock so big that he can't lift it, send me a response to that. Is it possible for God to answer a prayer if someone fervently, single-mindedly per se, as we call it, dotted all the I's, crossed all the T's, fervently to God, and say, God, make the devil bigger and more powerful than you are? I mean, you'd be surprised at some of the prayers these people are praying. I mean, when you get that, I tell you what, in your prayer life, there's some prayers that that you done thought about it now and you go, that may not have been the right thing. God forgive me for my, inadequacies. You realize that prayer didn't benefit nobody. And that's the concept. That's the concept. The next topic. Praying beyond God's ability is not just based on who he is, but also on who we are, our relationship to him, and the degree of our maturity. What is our relationship with God? If you don't have a relationship with God through his son Jesus Christ, how do you expect him to answer your prayer? If you don't have a relationship. And I put here, one of the greatest mistakes we make is trying to get God to answer a prayer that is not in the best interest of everyone concerned. biggest mistakes. Our relationship with God through His Son, Jesus Christ. Our relationship. What kind of relationship do we got? That you can ask Him to do something like that. So if you don't have a good relationship, then how do you expect your prayers to get answered? You praying double-minded. You praying to Him as if you know Him. You know, think of it this way. You know, I'm trying to make this as simple as we can because I'm a simple person too. You tell me I'm simple. I'm there. When somebody asks you for something and you have no idea who they are, you know, you like, yeah, I don't know. Let me think about it. Because you don't have a relationship with them. You know, I mean, you just don't have a relationship with them. A relationship in the sense that you can loan them your tools, or you can loan them your car, or you can do the, you know, there's certain relationships. You might know them, but you don't have that relationship with them. So the same thing that God might know you, but you ain't got no relationship. So how you expect Him to answer? It's because not all prayers keeps God's good primary, nor do they seek to bless His kingdom. So the prayers that go unanswered don't involve blessing His kingdom, and they don't involve God's good. So you see, when you start breaking the prayer down, now you got to see whether or not it keeps God's good in the primary and it blesses His kingdom. Now, here's where we come off at. What if God gave you, I mean, we all got the power. What if God gave you power to heal anybody just by touching? No matter what the ailment is, you just touch them. Sooner or later, you're going to say, well, shoot, I can heal anybody. And you get boastful and proud of yourself, and above that, people start looking at you like you God. Pride. Pride. And I put here, pride prevents God from being good to us and hinders many answers to our prayers. Our pride. Our pride. And I have a foundation here, and when you go to Ezekiel, I done passed it by. Ezekiel chapter 28, verse 17, around verse 17, and then says, thine heart was lifted up because of thy beauty. Thou hast corrupted thy wisdom by reason of thy brightness. I will cast thee to the ground. I will lay thee before kings, that they may behold thee. Who are you talking about? Who's he talking about? That's how Satan got kicked out. Beauty. His heart was lifted up. He felt he was so beautiful that he was above God. And the reason why is because he felt he was beautiful. He was more beautiful than God. And then God cast him out. So you see, pride. Pride. And I put it, God can only trust us with a very small portion of His power and ability to work miracles because of the human pride factor. The human pride factor is what got Satan kicked out of heaven. His pride. He felt that he was more beautiful than anybody. And therefore he was above God. And his reasons for that is because he felt he was more beautiful than everybody else. So if God gave you the power to work miracles, would you do it without pride? How do you stop pride from getting in the way? Because he gave you the ability to perform the miracle, and you can perform so many of them, but he knows sooner or later your pride going to get in the way. And you're going to feel, and you're going to think that you all that in a bag of chips. That's why he can only give us a small pile, a small portion. So when we praying for miracles, he can't give us, he gives us some, but he want to see how we act. If he gave you the ability to heal anybody with just your touch, he said eventually your pride gonna get in the way. You're gonna do the same thing that got Satan kicked out of heaven, because Satan thought he recognized his beauty. He was beautiful, more beautiful than everybody else. He was like, well, hey, wait a minute. I'm the most beautiful thing up here. Pride is what got him kicked out. So our pride hinders us a lot of times, hinders God from answering our prayers. Our pride. So, many times the people who see these miracles will elevate the person being used by God to a higher plane than God himself. And that's some of the stuff that's happening to a lot of our pastors. The people in the congregation are holding them above God. That they worship this person. And I'm not saying that you can't follow a pastor. I'm not saying that. I'm a pastor of a church. I mean, if you want to follow me, fine and good. Don't worship me. Trust me. I ain't got no heaven or hell to put you in. I can't grant you salvation. I cannot grant you everlasting life. Please do not worship me. But I can tell you what. You can come with me and we can worship Jesus Christ. How about that? Don't worship me. Come with me so we can. So you see the word I said we. Not just me. We can worship Jesus Christ. But that's the problem that we see. Is that a lot of people elevate this person above God. And they give them a God-like reverence. Now, listen. We love to pick on this whenever it comes down. And another one we can pick on, is the Jonestown Massacre. They worship him like a god. They worshiped him like a god. So they were putting him above God. And a lot of times, in that the parishioners elevate the man of God above God. Now, I want you to listen to words I use now. Elevate the man of God Above God. So how can he be above God if he's a man of God? He can't. But yet we elevate him above that. And when we start elevating him above that, then here comes pride. And sooner or later, it's just human nature. So you see, that prevents a lot of us from, because our prayers are prideful. See, it's not really what we do when people are looking. It's what we do behind the closed doors. When nobody's looking, how's your prayer?
Integrity.
Right. Same thing with integrity, But doing the right thing even when nobody's looking. So in the privacy, when nobody's looking, is your prayer legitimate? I mean, the only person can answer that is you. I can't answer that. But your prayers are going unanswered, so you need to start looking at your prayer. Don't look at God. God's in the prayer answered business. Think about it. God is in the prayer answering business. So if you ain't getting your prayers answered, you got to look and see on your prayer. Is my prayer prideful? Does my prayer benefit everybody? Does my prayer bless his kingdom? If it don't feel both of them, I can tell you right now, you praying wavering. Let not that man think he shall receive anything from God. But yet we keep praying. And we praying fervently and hard and all of that. And fasting and all of that. Again, we back to Isaiah 58, 1 through 5. We back to that. And then we get mad because God didn't answer my prayer. Check your prayer. You might be getting the answer. I want to help you, but I can't. Even if I wanted to. Because your prayer. The next part. God's greatest gift to man is man's will. Call that choice. Man's ability to choose to serve God or to serve God's enemy. Choice. Choice. Now you want me to tell you about choice? You know it was wrong. The Spirit spoke to you and told you it was wrong. And guess what? You did it anyway. You made a choice. And then remember now, with choices come consequences. There's a consequence to every choice. There's a consequence to every choice. There's a consequence to serving God, and there's a consequence to serving God's enemy. God gave man his love, and man rewarded him with violence. He gave us his love, and look what we did. Look what we did. No, what not did. Look what we are doing. Speaking in the present tense. Look what we are doing. God gave us his love, and look at what mankind is doing. Rewarding him with violence. Violence. And it's not always, it may not always be physical violence, but it could be hatred in our hearts. That's violence. God's love, He gave us His love. And look what we do. Now I want you to think about this for a minute now. God gave us His love. And we reward Him with violence. We pray that something happened to somebody. We pray that this person dies. We pray that this person hurt. You know how it is. Somebody hurt you, so you pray to God that they get hurt. Now, let me ask you a question. Now, come on. Come on, let's be real. Just me and you, come on, let's talk. God gave you His love. And what do? You take that love to come to Him to pray violence on somebody else. Come on. And then you wonder why your prayer don't get answered. Come on. Come on. Man took the greatest gift ever bestowed and turned and used it against Him. Used it against God. We use it against God. Because we are praying double mind. We are praying with our love in our hearts. We're praying. Do you know when we are praying for God to get at somebody, or praying that I have an opportunity to get at somebody, to pay somebody back for what they did to me? Do you know that you're praying with vengeance and violence in your heart? Now, I don't care how you slice it now. Now, we all done prayed a little prayer like that. If somebody did something to us, then we pray that God get them, or pray that I have an opportunity to get them back double. Do you know you're praying with vengeance and violence and hatred in your heart? How do you expect God to answer that prayer? You ain't even praying with love. Let me calm down here a minute. I'm calming down. By allowing man to choose, I want you to listen to this. By allowing man to choose, God limits Himself in what He can do for man. I want you to think about that. By the gift of choice. If God gave us the best, the best gift of choice, we use that against God. So, okay, God, you gave me the ability of choice. That's my will. My will is to do Him harm. Do you think God's going to answer that? I mean, seriously. So we turn around and use His love and our choice, our ability to choose against God. God saying, wait a minute. I gave you the choice. I gave you love. Your love for your fellow man, which means love for your fellow man is going to benefit him. And then to glorify my kingdom. And now you take the choice and use it against me. You want me to do something not out of love, but out of hatred and vengeance. And then You get mad at me for not answering it? I mean, come on. I mean, think about that for a moment now. Put yourself in God's place if you can, just for a moment. You granted mankind, you gave them the best gift, the gift of choice. You gave him his little love. You gave man love. The choice. And what does he do? He take his choice, what you gave him, and use it against him. I gave you choice. I gave you love, and you turn around and use it against me. Because you're asking me to do something for you. Not out of love, but out of hatred and vengeance. And you expect me to do that? And then you gonna get mad at me? How silly is mankind? But I'm just saying, when God gave us the choice, the ability to choose, he limited himself in what we can do. Because guess what? Man's choices become selfish. Man's choices become selfish. And God is reluctant to answer a selfish prayer. Okay, now think about this. All right, let's play with this. A selfish prayer. Who does that selfish prayer supposedly benefit? Does it benefit everybody in concern? Does it glorify God's kingdom? Or are you only talking about yourself?